Arslan has been added to the commanders in the game that are available to be awakened, and I think this is a welcome addition. For quite a while now, we've just had infantry and bowman commanders, one after the other, honestly. Stuff like O'Bane and Kravras is the most recent releases before this, which no one really cared about, in my experience at least. Very few people run bows. It's not exactly a good thing to run on the whole. It's mostly a defensive playstyle where you want to be soloed as a trap account or rallied, which is just a very niche, awkward thing to get huge value out of. In live PvP scenarios at least, it's pretty good and glorious battle we've seen, and it's the best thing you can do in Siege of Winterfell also, which is coming up. But in terms of Arslan, he's basically, in terms of stats, a Spearman equivalent of Chris. He has 66% spear attack, 66% spear health, and 18% spear defense at max. He also has the wood production. I don't know how much this is. I'm not going to spend the books to be able to do the maths to see. But if you're a wood hyper farm, he will add wood production as well, just as an added bonus. So we now have him and Gorell competing for that best free-to-play Spearman Awakening. If you are free-to-play and you're running Imp Spear or Spear anything as your main formation, I would definitely get both to at least 3-star regardless. But I do think they vary a bit in which is best actually at 4-star. So if we look at Arslan's 4-star ability, I mean, first of all, in terms of his tavern, he doesn't have combat rate or leadership, so the increased tavern stats are, like Gorell, pretty pointless on Arslan. And his 4-star, in battle, every 8 seconds, Commander Arslan heals 2% of the wounded for the allied troop with the greatest losses. So this is more in-combat healing, which plays with the whole Jaime weakness attack setup we see with stuff like Hector and Lats, Drake, Enzo, which is becoming a bit more prominent. But Arslan obviously is free to play, so if you're really investing in him and using him in PvP, it's somewhat unlikely you'll actually be using that weakness attack setup because it is very, very high budget to even think about getting much use out of that. And in isolation, this skill, I'm not sure how great it realistically is. So it'll proc basically 5 times in a battle. It'll proc at 8 seconds, 16 seconds, 24, 32, and 40 if it's a real PvP fight. The first proc or 2 of it will do very, very little just because nothing will be wounded. But I think I did the maths in my last video, and if you had, say, 200k defeated troops in a fight, you'd maybe heal about 6 to 8k across, which is fairly decent, honestly, for minimizing losses. Those last few heal ticks will make a fairly significant difference, and it is in combat healing too, so it won't just be loss minimization, I'd assume, because I would imagine it bumps up your morale during the fight to help decide who the winner is, on paper at least. I think because of this 4-star, if you're running a spear front, Arslan will be a bit better than Gorell, but if you're running Imp Spear or Cav Spear, I would say Gorell is still slightly better, because Arslan has the health, which is better than defense on Gorell. They both have the attack, the exact same value there, but Gorell's 4-star is very, very good. This will proc on every lineup you have, so on every front row. It won't just be Gorell's group. And this 4-star is actually most ideal on the back row, because when your spearmen all die, that's obviously only going to happen if your spear are on the front row. And you will have situations, especially in solo attacks, where your spears will all die and then they won't be able to proc Gorell's 4-star, obviously. So Gorell better on the back line, because you don't get more out of the better defensive stats, and his 4-star just does a bit more synergy with being on the back line, and Arslan is probably a little bit better as a front on the front line, because he has the better defensive stats, and his 4-star just does a bit better synergy with it. Overall, I do think this is quite a good awakening actually. It's very similar to Chris. in his value. I think Spearfront is probably becoming more and more popularized again. It's very meta to have Cav heavily buffed as a DPS on the back line to shred imp fronts. So having a Spearfront might be coming a little bit more back into favor, because you have stuff like Annie as the one which most people advise to level first as a epic token commander, just because her 3-star stats are so high value with the totals, like the total attack in particular, along with the total health and defense, is just huge value, especially to something like Layla. Layla at 4 stars is obviously amazing, but it's all in the 4-star ability. Her actual stats, unless you're Cav front, aren't actually that good, especially compared to the alternatives like Annie. But Annie has innate spear health, just spear health. You have the same thing with Jamie with the weakness attack comp, where he has just natural spear defense and health. So quite a lot of the meta premium commanders at the moment are just naturally buffing spear tankiness. So you could find a bit more value of Arslan there if you can manage to fit him into some of those comps if Spearfront becomes more popular, because he obviously has very good spear stats. I think Imp Spear is a very popular free-to-play or lower spending formation. I think something like Chris, Arslan, Gorell, Haley, and Gold Seg, I guess, if you're a bit low spending, or you'll just have to sell for something unawakened if you don't have him. But as I've made a video on before, you really do want to run all awakened commanders if at all possible, even if you're free to play, just because the commander damage boosts you get are so massive, even aside from the stats you actually gain just through the awakening process itself. But all in all, good addition. If he suits your account, throw your books into him, throw your elite tokens into him. Definitely a solid awakening. And his 4-star, albeit slightly complicated, is fairly decent in its value, and will only get more value as well if you're talking in rally situations and stuff like that. But I like Arslan this. It's a good free-to-play awakening, and definitely worth people's time and investment, I think. Definitely in the higher tiers of free-to-play awakenings at this point in time. Up there with the Arias, the Gorells, the Segs in value for sure.